All right. Welcome to this week's episode of our Franchise Accelerator podcast. I'm really excited about today's topic because I think as we get to the end of the year, as we look to next year, a lot of what people are talking about, especially in the restaurant industry, is technology. So one thing we want to do as we're looking at our budgets and setting our targets is really evaluate what we're spending in technology. And the biggest question is, are we getting a return for the dollars that we're spending in technology? So as we think about the restaurant industry specifically, there's a lot of softwares that have come around with the idea of helping you in some way, right? So we would say scheduling software, point of sale, inventory management.
Yeah. So there are tons for each one. There's something now, and some do multiple ones. That's the other question: is do you bundle them all together?
Yep. So I think as a starting point, what you want to do is really look at your monthly subscription service, because for the most part, they're set up as some sort of subscription base, maybe per user, and really use that as your starting point. So if you're spending, let's say, $1,000 a month on your subscription services between your inventory management, your software, or your POS, and then your scheduling software, I think the three key questions that we'll sort of work through today would be, one, are you seeing a cost savings, right? So did that technology save you in labor, which is usually the marketing is.
Absolutely.
So if you look at, say, a scheduling software example, you're going to pay $200 for the scheduling software, but it's going to...
Yeah, like the goal with any of these, again, saying is, are they going to pay off for your operational excellence in the future? And I think labor is a great one to start. If it's, like you said, let's say it's a couple $100 a month, then, will that save you by able to make different templates or go up against forecasted sales or be able to track different slow periods or even some that will, basically as you plug in bodies, know what that person is making. Right. So there's so much it can do, and that would pay that software off. Like I think there's, depending on the restaurant. Now, if you have 3 employees, it's probably not worth having a scheduling software. I think that's always going to be the question as we do any of this is, what do you think you need at your restaurant? Because even as you get that schedule software, there's going to be different bells and whistles, right? You can pick this program, this, and I think that's the thing is you really need to kind of do your own little bit of research on what you need and what you're going to get out of it.
Exactly. So, and I think remembering that, for there to be a return, it's not always dollars. So, one would be cost savings. Sure. The next would be, does it generate revenue? So like you're saying, by having the right staff, by having the best people on at the best times, being able to predict, maybe that grows your sales because they upsell and they sell more. And then the third one would be some sort of efficiency. Like, do you just feel like you run a better restaurant? And I think the other side of this, which makes it sort of an intangible technology, is sometimes it's the employees like it better, right? Absolutely. So they might enjoy a scheduling software, which again would be another part of that ROI, even though there aren't, you're still spending $200, but your employees are happier and they enjoy their work better.
Yeah, and maybe it's easier for them to trade shifts or easier for them to request time off, which is all going to go into the retaining your staff and keep them for the future. And kind of what you said also on the time savings, right? If it can save a manager how much time per week that manager can maybe do other things, you're obviously paying that manager some sort of, whether it's a salary or an hourly wage. So if the time savings can equal out, there's a lot of ways that could kind of, in the long run, pay off, not just for dollar per dollar.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes this a hard conversation, is because you almost have to rewind and say, we've gotten so used to having this technology, what really would it have taken to build a schedule without a scheduling software? Like, do we even remember? I don't know. Right? How many hours a week to really build and manage a schedule? Yeah,
I think it depends on how many staff you had, but I remember writing schedules by hand from a server staff of 90 servers at one point. That took some time. That was a project. That was a weekly project that you were doing every single week. And then I remember having to go drop it off at the printer. And that printer would go make, 90 copies of it. You can leave it back,
So that alone has some cost to it.
And now you have a digital schedule that everybody can access on their phone. Yeah. Change things around for everybody.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a really good, and I think the other part of that is, as you go into next year, I think a lot of what we're seeing is, softwares are getting more expensive and, maybe increasing in cost, but really remembering that, the time value of your manager, your manager has a rate of, say, $50 an hour,
Sure,
whatever it
right,
is.
exactly.
And, if you add 4 hours to that
Right.
manager's list, like there alone, it could potentially pay for itself. So working through, so that's scheduling software. So I think, by and large, I think the big thing there is, again, making sure people are using it. I think the only downside that we've seen in technology, which we talk a lot about on the F Your Business side of things, is the downside of it is if it's too automated, right? Like the good side of a manual process was, even though it's 5 hours, as an owner, I knew my GM had to have a manual eyes on everyone's schedule. Like they owned that schedule before it went out the door. They had to, because they had to write it, right? Here, I think the only downside we've seen across the board in technology is, are you paying attention? Like if you're overstaffed, yes, the software can tell you, but you have so much data coming at you. Do you really notice that you're 5% too high in controllable labor, or does it just go away and no one checked it and now it's costing us money?
Yeah, I think it depends on what whoever's using that system, how it's set up. I mean, I think like any technology, there's going to be setup time. I think you need to understand that to do it right, that manager will put the time in to figure out what it can and can't do, because I think that's what we see a lot of times is we just think we bought the technology, it's here now, I push a button, it's going to work.
Yes.
And that's not usually the case.
Well, and that's one thing we were talking about, I think, which is the next set of software we'll talk about, which is the checklist apps, right? Everyone loves the checklist app. Anytime you go to a trade show, it's like, oh, wow, like you can click the checklist, take a picture. But again, those are only as good as the people reviewing it. So if it's too automated, are people really going in to check the result every week? So whether it's the scheduling or the checklist, like, can you see how many people called out? Can you see how many people worked longer than they were supposed to? Or is everybody just kind of moving on and not holding the business accountable every week based on the information in the softwares?
Which again is the most important part of it, right? Is the actual follow-up. I mean, whether it's a scheduling technology or, like you said, a checklist technology or an inventory technology, it only gets you so far. Someone has to be the one then to use the data that it gave you.
Yes.
To either write a better schedule, make sure the checklist was completed. There's no shortcut to those parts of it.
Yeah. And that's where I think what's important here is, this week really digging into the software that you have, and then also digging in a lot of what we talk about too is the changing expectation of your manager, right? 20 years ago, the manager was writing the schedule. Well, now the manager is still accountable for the schedule, but they just need to be checking that app. If there's, alerts and whatever is going on in the app, they need to be the one that owns it. And, still having that same level of accountability. Also with the checklist, right? Your manager really needs to be the one who's monitoring. It can't just be like, well, I told them to do it and they didn't do it. Like the manager owns that they do it, and the manager knows who is and who isn't.
Right. And as an owner or GM, what's your system in place to do that? Are you checking that weekly? Are you checking it daily? Or how are you making sure that it's still part of your routine to check whatever technology checklist that you've either created or the manager's created?
Exactly. And I think that's, so the third part of, software, because I really wouldn't argue that the point of sale systems have proven their weight, right? Like I think those, for the most part, I think that 5 years ago, there was the argument of Toast. Is it really good? Is it really worth it? Like I feel like across the board, for the most part, Toast has a place to stay. Like it has so much information and the way it's integrated with third-party apps. So point of sale, I think, we you need that at this point. Like,
almost not going to call it technology anymore, right? I mean,
it's just part of it.
You don't see that many paper tickets anymore.
No, and you're not going back to the register. No.
Right.
Yeah. So, that one isn't even kind of on our list. But I think the next one to talk about with, accountability is that back of house inventory software. Because I think the big thing we've seen here is, have you complicated the process? Because one really important element of having return on your investment in any area, but especially technology, is, did it add efficiency? And I would say one thing we've seen, especially me on the accounting side, you on the ops side, is it feels like there's this gray area now of like, what do I really have in my walk-in cooler? Like I have what it tells me I have, but that might not even be close to accurate.
Right. Yeah, I think with those new inventory systems, it really, you need to decide what you want out of it to start, right? Because we have a lot of, we've seen that there's these advanced systems, but they're not really being used correctly, which then almost just defeats the point of paying that monthly fee, because you're really just paying, you could have an Excel spreadsheet to track what you have.
Yeah.
So if you, or See, a lot of places aren't even doing inventory. So they have this fancy inventory system
Right.
that they have to be able to help them with orders and help them with prepping and all these things. But there's nothing getting put into it. So it's just sort of sitting there and, not really getting your value out of that system that, you're paying for.
Well, and I think that part of that too is, the changing staffing. You probably don't have most of your staff that's been with you very long. They could have been there a year or two, but there's been so much turnover in the industry that you're putting a lot on them with these technologies. So I think you really have to make sure that it's a technology that works for your operation, that is something that they can use. But otherwise, I think we've seen a lot where it's just this butting of heads between owner and manager, and really, nobody's winning.
And sometimes even technology is kind of butting heads with each other. I feel like we've ever seen that. With some of the, POS doesn't talk the inventory system like they thought it was going to. So, when making those choices, you really want to kind of have something that kind of flows in, to the next, and using, both systems together, not just, because if you have to input extra information and that manager's not saving any time, then you're back to square one. Of why are you using that system?
Well, and I think that's the part where, managing our expectations of technology. If you walk around any of the trade shows, they're going to tell you that this is, the next ticket to a lottery, right? Like that everything is going to be solved by the technology. And in reality, those same problems still are always going to be there. You're still going to have the question of inventory management and shrinkage. You're still going to have the question of sales.
Right.
Like those fundamental problems that exist in hospitality are always going to be there. So we have to make sure that we're still keeping our eye on the ball. And I think a lot of what we talk about with clients is, he said, this could be a great software long term, but you can't take your eye off the ball with the dollars and where they're getting spent. And does it make sense, or is something else happening?
Yeah, like I said, it doesn't replace the operations. Hopefully it takes some time maybe away from your operators. But if they're not using it, you're not going to get the results that you want out of it.
Yeah.
And that's what we have seen, that we think it just, I put the number in, I push a button, and now my restaurant becomes profitable.
Right, exactly. And I think that's the other question to really ask yourself when you're doing this audit is, I think the one other, not that we're against technology, because we're not, right? Like, we use it all the time, and, think technology is great. It enables us to see things we wouldn't otherwise see. But then the other downside is, has it taken you physically out of your business, right? And it's no different than corporate world or, people working from home, is that it's great to be able to log in at 7 a.m. when you get up and check, the daily sales or whatever you checked in the night before. But that really doesn't replace you being in your business,
right?
At least to check in, right? We're not saying you're there 80 hours a week, but just the things that you would see that nobody else will see if you're not there, who's seeing them, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even from a checklist standpoint, like I said, if you're doing those on those digital checklists, whether it's you or the general manager, who's still checking them, and you can't check them from your office or from your home. You have to be walking a cooler.
Yeah.
You have to be walking something to really dig in. Is that area clean? Is that prepped correctly? A picture's only going to get you so far.
Right. Exactly. And that's where I think, our challenge to you as we start to build our roadmap for 2024 is, this is something that's not going away, right? This is going to be more a part of your operations in 24 than it is in 23, than it was in 22. So we just have to find a way to find, like you said, the technology that works for your business, not for every business, but what works for your business, and making sure that your standards are still the same, whether it's technology or in person.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So good luck. Homework this week is go do your own technology audit, right? Write down all the different technology that you use. And I would encourage you, ask your employees, right? Don't just make the decision, this software is X, but let's really ask them, right? Get their feedback and make this a starting point to building a technology budget for 2024.
The foundation of our team is a shared objective. As specialists in the hospitality industry, we understand the importance of timely and accurate reporting for our clients, which has been made even more crucial throughout the post-pandemic industry recovery.
We truly believe our mission is to give back to business owners control of their finances so that they can make better decisions daily.
The way that we are consistently showing value to our clients is by speaking with them on a weekly basis. Not only do they have the relationship with their lead accountant, but they have the opportunity to meet with industry experts.
The truth is that things will never be like they were before 2020. But we believe that our weekly accountability model will help you adapt to the new reality and grow and evolve into an even better business in the years to come.